Are you the biggest buyer?
Over the last 18 months, I would say, in the spot market, yes.
Per Jander, you are the guy who is buying the uranium for Sprott Physical Uranium Trust. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I have a couple of colleagues who help out when we're very busy, but in general terms, I am, yes.
This is the guy, and he's here in CTO studio. Thank you, Per, for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure.
You have studied at Linköping University.
I have,
Same
yes.
as me. The best university.
I was there for 2 years, but I very much enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
And then you've lived in Switzerland, Australia, France.
Yeah, France a little bit, Germany, England, Norway, South Africa, Australia again.
Now you're based in Boston.
In Boston, yes. I work for a commodity merchant, a Dutch commodity merchant. We deal mostly with nuclear fuel, but we're currently expanding into battery metals as well, battery materials. It's obviously a booming industry. Commodities in general, but certainly both the nuclear energy field and battery materials as well. So it's a very exciting time.
And before this, you worked at Cameco.
Cameco, yeah, for a bit over a decade, mostly marketing in Europe and some of their trading, because they also have a bit of a trading desk.
So how did you get into uranium?
That's it. People always ask me that. Like, or jokingly say that, little kids running around, they want to be astronauts or they want to be doctors. And then I was running around with a suitcase. I wanted to be a uranium salesman, but that was not the case. I started out trading electricity out of college, and I've always been interested in energy. So for some reason, well, I know the reason is actually my dad, but
what did he do?
He was an energy engineer in general. He worked at the Oskarshamn power station, nuclear power station, but he also sold gas turbines for ASEA at the time. We grew up in few years in Finspång in Östergötland here in Sweden. So I was there until I was 12, 13 years old. And then he moved to Dalarna, where I now am from, and Falun. And he was in charge of the district heating program there. So he sold the power station to the local utility, and then he actually convinced them to hire him as the operator and the head of it as well. So energy has been very central. He was always obviously fixated about energy, like close the window, close the door, close the fridge, everything had to do with energy. He built his own solar panels on our house. This was already late 70s, and he basically built his own solar panel. Obviously, it was more pure solar. It wasn't chemicals. It was just sort of dark and reflectors and heating water. But already back in the 70s. So he was well ahead of his time. But
you didn't build your own nuclear reactor in your house?
The weird glow from the bathtub, like weird stuff happening in there, we stayed away. No, he did not. So, but it's always been, energy has always fascinated me.
You mentioned the town Finspång. For our Swedish viewers, you might not know, but I'm actually from Mjölby.
Yeah, you're from Mjölby?
Yeah, I'm from Mjölby.
Vi bor i Mjölby.
Yeah, let's not talk about that. I tend to leave that out of my background, so I just say I'm from Falun.
Okay, so here comes my first question. Is there a lot of uranium available on the spot market now, or is it dry?
It is some available, not a lot, certainly not as much as there was about a year and a half ago. That is mostly dried up. It hasn't been that much purchasing going on, at least not as intense as it's been over the last, say, 18 months. So for the last 6 of those, it hasn't been that intense. And you have offtake agreements, mostly intermediaries and traders who have offtake agreements from mines, and they tend to replenish their inventories when there's not that much activity in the spot market. So that sort of builds up a little, but there's still, early this year, SPUT alone bought about 2 million pounds, and there's been a fair bit of transactions. And the interesting thing there is that there's not that many investors that have been in buying. We've seen a lot of utilities. We have seen a lot of producers who are short. They openly say that they are short, so they need to buy themselves. What's most fascinating, I would say, is that we've seen wide variety of utilities. Normally, there's one or two who maybe picks up a little 100,000 pounds here or there, but now we're actually seeing there's a handful of them, and there's been fairly significant volumes as well that they pick up. So I think it's a healthy sign to see that there's not just 1 or 2 or 3 buyers. Now you actually have a fair bit of them, and it's a healthier market in that sense. And also for the last, say, 18 months, not just SPUT, but it's also Yellow Cake and other investors. As soon as they were not present, the spot price started to drift down.
Right.
But now when those kind of buyers have been mostly quiet, you have the spot market is holding up very firmly. And so it feels 50 is, I won't say a hard floor, but it feels like it is holding up quite well there
I'm bringing up the chart here, guys. It's been really flat basically since autumn last year. Why do you think that is?
I mean, I would say the main factor is probably the absence of financial players buying. Sprott has been very quiet. Yellowcake has been quiet. The other funds, they have mostly been absent in the market. And I think that's more of a
Why do you think that is?
I think those kind of investors, that's more just a general downturn, markets in general. I mean, it's you try to launch other funds and it's just very little purchase interest. You see that a lot of investors seem to be cash heavy and they have not yet stepped back in. Again, I don't work so much on the investor side of things. I certainly travel along with John at Sprott and talk to them, and you can just see that they're still reluctant to. General markets are still quite shaky. They want to see what the Fed is going to do, what's happening with rates, when are they going to sort of want to step in a bigger, meaningful way. And so I think it's as simple as that.
So just to clarify, so you mean it's the general market conditions, the macro market conditions, not specific to uranium?
Uranium is doing better than ever, I would say. It's, I mean, the general outlook for nuclear energy is, I've been around it for 20 years, and it certainly has never looked any better.
Why is that? Or in what aspect?
It's, I mean, you can see that you pretty much can open up the newspaper if there is such a thing, or log in on any news site these days anyway, and you can just see that it's news pretty much every day. Like before, if you had one of those pieces of news in 6 months, we'd go out for drinks. You'd say that today was a good day.
Yeah.
And today, you read more or less every day, there's multiples of, we're going to expand our nuclear program, we're this mothballed nuclear power stations, we're actually talking about starting it back up again, or we're extending the life for 10, 20 years of these one. The entire Japanese program is looking at extending the life for 20 years. I mean, this is huge.
Yeah.
Like these pieces of, and it's not just one, there's 2, 3, 4, 5 of these really good stories that are happening. So from that perspective, and I focus only on the physical side of things.
Yeah.
I don't really deal with equities.
But on the physical side then, why do you think not more of these professional buyers are, stressed out buying?
I can't speak for them. I mean, I would.
I just guess. Yeah.
I don't know. I guess it's just nervousness in general about the markets. Because, I mean, anyone should probably just do the math and do the fundamentals and see how much uranium is going to be needed, how much is going to come online, at what price is it going to be produced. I can't say exactly when things are going to happen, but the fact that it's been holding up so firm around $50 when there's been a fairly big lack of buying interest, to me, is a very healthy sign.
Yeah.
And if you look at the nuclear fuel cycle itself and what the fuel buyers at the utilities are doing, well, about a year ago, Russia invaded Ukraine, and that was obviously very unexpected. There was a knee-jerk reaction to that, but obviously markets thought like, there might be sanctions on Russia, so that triggered some interest. But yeah, utilities tend to not panic. They're very very level-headed, very methodical. But what they need to do, you don't buy uranium first and then go down the chain. You actually start in the back end. I mean, you start with the last piece you need, which is the fuel bundle itself. So you do the specifications for the fuel bundle. Once you know what that looks like, when you talk to your core guys or girls and they say like, this is what we're going to need for the next few cycles. Okay, then we design the fuel elements. This is what you're going to fill up with uranium, how much uranium you're going to need. And then we're talking not the natural uranium, we're talking about enriched uranium.
Yeah.
So then you need to buy the enrichment services, you need to buy the conversion, and then you buy the uranium. So we saw a rush to enrichers and converters last year because that's where Russia is big.
Yeah.
They don't produce much natural uranium. They they do a lot of enrichment services, they do conversion services. So that's where the potential bottleneck was. But it was also the first place on the fuel chain where you needed to focus on before you want to worry about. And in general, there is a fair bit of U3O8 around. At least that can be price sensitive. If the prices go to $100, there will be some more uranium available. If it goes to 150, 200, certainly there will be lots available. It will just take a while to get there. But there is a finite amount of enrichment and conversion. So that's what you need to focus on first. And we saw that. The numbers of tenders skyrocketed. And you saw prices of conversion and enrichment quadrupled in about a year.
Yeah.
Uranium doubled, but that was not so much a result of utilities buying. That was more the financial and the vehicles that you can use as an investor to invest in uranium is for U3O8 or yellow cake, the most basic form.
So much of the uranium that is available on the spot market, where does it primarily come from?
It sits with mostly intermediaries who get it from either offtake contracts with producers. You certainly can talk directly to some producers. Most of them, at least the really big ones like a Cameco and Kazatomprom, they tend to not sell so much into the spot market. They actually have most of the bilateral contracts with utilities for multiple years out in time. You have some producers that are more dig and deliver, like BHP is a very well-known example of that. Uranium is so small in their overall production that they want 100% spot market exposure. They don't worry about sort of convoluted contracts and long-term and all those things. So they sell into the spot market, not necessarily them directly. They have agreements with intermediaries. So you obviously find their material there every now and then. Uzbekistan is a similar example, which is fairly large production, but they sell it mainly to a couple of Japanese trading houses. So that material come in from them. So it is not a market as such where you click on a screen. It's very archaic. It's phone calls, emails, you go around, you walk around, and you meet people at conferences. You only deal with people you know.
Yeah.
So, and it's say that we bought over 40 million pounds now for the last year and a half with Sprott, and we have maybe up to 30 counterparties, but 80% of the material is from less than 10. So you have a few, you know who to call, essentially. And the market is small enough that you have a fairly good who is actively selling right now, and then you just call them first. Or there are a couple of brokers you can use as well. If you don't want people to know that you're in the market, it's almost funny. It's almost it's not such a big market that you can be completely anonymous. At the same time, it's not as small as that you can just sort of know exactly it's that person or that person you can call. There's a little bit of uncertainty, which kind of...
Are you the biggest buyer?
Personally, I would say it's, over the last 18 months, I would say in the spot market, yes, SPUT has been the largest buyer for sure.
So you get it straight from the man.
But then, of course, you have EDF, for example, a large French utility. Now, their yearly need is 26, 27 million pounds. So they're but they also power 80% of the country of France. But they don't buy in the spot market. They have long-term contracts with producers and suppliers. So it's a little split up in that way. Like most utilities, they tend to work in the long-term market, bilateral contracts, negotiate with producers. And then in the spot market itself, there are more traders, intermediaries. You have, say, out of that, if the spot market is between 80 and 100 million pounds a year, sort of the fresh uranium that comes in is maybe 15-20% of that. So that's the one stuff that comes in from producers and what's getting bought from utilities, and the rest of it is sort of intermediaries, mostly buying and selling. But you have some that Cameco at least used to, now I think they're working their way back there as well, but they had what at least we called 10-15 years ago over contracting strategy. It was basically that you produce about 20 million pounds a year, but you sell 30 million pounds a year, which means you're consistently 10 million pounds short. Now, some of that came from historical purchase contract, the megatons to megawatts, for example, the downblending of Russian weapons-grade uranium. But a lot of it we just bought in the spot market, because just to have a constant presence in the spot market and kind of know what's going on, who's buying, who's selling. So it's some fact-finding, but also to just be familiar with the market, because a lot of the long-term contracts, they're not at fixed prices. They might tied to whatever the index is. So clearly you have some exposure to the price, even though you don't necessarily are in there buying and selling all the time.
Is the market exhausted? It's not really at this point.
No, it's not. It's you can certainly find material in the spot market, and I don't think it ever has been exhausted. There were days when we were very busy buying in the fall of 2021, but you could still find material. You just have to go a little further out in time. So you might not get delivery for the next couple of months. You might go a little further out. But on some days, it's just like there's just nothing around today, so we're just going to wait a few days. Because people saw in anticipation that, okay, these guys are really going to keep buying at any price. They just backed up, and just to do that, and then to see market come crashing down a couple of days later makes no sense. We sort of changed our attitude a little bit in discussion with Sprott that, it actually makes sense to sit on a little bit of money for a while, wait to market out a little bit and then sort of be a little bit more opportunistic in picking up.
How has the term market changed the past 6 months?
It's the last 6 months. I mean, prices have been fairly stable, and that's kind of. And as an outside investor, I can see the frustration when you're looking at it's like, okay, well, we kind of understand the spot market and a lot of some, but it's not the big market. The big market is the term market, and everybody will say that. So okay, but how do we understand it? The spot market is opaque to begin with, and the term market is virtually impossible to know what's going on. You get a price from the price reporters that gets published once a month, and that's all you see. You can see in the text they write up. They sort of there's a few tenders here going on, there's a little bit of this, but you really don't know what's going on. So that's obviously what we do in our conversations with Sprott in our role as technical advisors. We tell them what's going on there because at WMC, the company where I work for, we are in that space. So we talk to all the utilities and all the producers about long-term contracts. So we have a fairly good handle of what's going on. And things have changed. Things have changed for sure, because even though it's definitely, anyone will agree that it's switched from being a buyer's market and now it's a seller's market. And yeah, it's been driven by the switch to sort of the macro switch towards electrification, where there's really a sort of a rebirth of nuclear energy that's on everybody's lips now, at least, and you see it in policy, green taxonomy. There's a lot of incentives for nuclear projects, and the Inflation Reduction Act has certainly changed the investment climate in the US and gives people the stability that they need. So I would say every single nuclear operator in the US are actually looking at new builds right now, and just as in Europe, very much the same as well. Maybe not Germany, but we don't talk about Germany. They're on their own path when I can't help them, and I don't know if anyone else can either. But so what you see is happening in the term market then is like clearly the power has shifted. And what happened when I was at Cameco, and there was mostly a buyer's market, and what they ask for is just that, okay, well, we want to buy some uranium from you, that's fine. We want to buy it over the X amount of years, say 5 years, we buy this much every year, but we want some of it to be a very fixed price, so we know exactly what we're buying. We can agree to have some little bit of index related there, but then we want a ceiling that's going to be fair. Negotiate a low ceiling, and the seller says, okay, I want a bit of a floor, and then that span can change very much depending on what the spot price is and where the momentum in the market is. There is also something like volume flex, and that can be up to 20%, where you basically can just, as a buyer, you have the right to flex up or down 20%. And you can, the embedded optionality in that. And when the market moves, 100% is quite significant. Yeah. So, of course, what happened last year when the invasion of Ukraine happened, every single utility with flexibility in the contract calls up the producer and say, yeah, I'm flexing up. So even though the need for uranium and uranium products in general increased because we're a little concerned about Russian deliveries, we want to beef up our inventories, and we certainly don't want to be caught as to be the last person to do this, everybody flexed up. So even though the demand that hit the producers right away was quite significant, no one saw it because it was embedded in the contract and it doesn't get reported, and there's no way for anyone to see that. So everybody flexes up, which also alleviates their need to replenish their contracts, right? So that took a lot of the hit. Now, of course, new contracts, now it's a seller's market. Well, there is no flexibility at all. And those ceilings have certainly gone up quite a bit as well. And now, whereas you might have had capped escalation rates on these prices, no, of course, no seller is gonna cap the escalation in today's environment. So those are all changing too. So you basically, all those bells and whistles have been removed, and now it's a bare bone contract. So you haven't seen the price move that much yet. It's moved maybe $5 or so, but all the value of the factors that have been removed is much, much higher than that. So basically the only thing left to move now is price. And we haven't seen the big influx for the reasons I said before. You've seen the conversion and enrichment prices, enrichment contracting activities come in, but you haven't seen it really hit the U3 market yet. So that's all has to come. And whether that's going to take 6 months, 12 months, 2 months, I really don't know, but I feel quite strongly about that it will happen. It's just a matter of time.
Good insights here, guys. I hope you're paying attention. I'm very excited actually to hear this. How do you see, say Cameco, where you worked on before? Cameco and all the other uranium stocks have basically been hammered here 2023, which is kind of a little surprising maybe, because we all have the same insight. It seems like uranium has a bright future. Every time we open the newspaper, there is something positive about uranium. Why do you think these kind of miners, and it's not just this company, if we look at, say, the Sprott uranium miners ETF, that's also down. It's not only that the stock market is down, because even if we take URNM divided by S&P 500, it's still down most of 2023. And even if we look at, say, URNM divided by spot price, proxied by the SPUT, that is also down. Why do you think that, if you should have to guess, no one knows why markets do, and we're all speculating and guessing here basically, but if you have to guess, why do you think that the miners have been hammered if it's looking this positive?
I really don't know. I mean, I deal with the physical stuff, so I know what the physical market is doing, and I'm very pleased to see that the physical market is holding up. Everything else is down, just like you say, and I really don't understand why. But the spot market is holding up, despite buying from investors. That says something to me, and it says quite a lot. But when as far as Cameco, why Cameco is down? Like I also I just want to clarify. I'm not picking on Cameco. They're all down. Exactly. And like juniors, I mean, they are a very risky asset, absolutely, like a risky investment. But I personally don't invest in much, so I really don't know why they are. But I cannot, from a fundamentals reason, as far as nuclear energy and uranium goes, there's no reason for them to be down. I really don't understand why. And yeah, Cameco has so many good stories. They have the mega contract with the Ukraine. They have, and I'm sure if all you're looking at is uranium as a commodity itself. And I can see there was a bit of a sell-off when Cameco announced that they're buying into Westinghouse. Because then if all you cared about was the uranium price, and it's like, oh, well, even before they were maybe not that exposed to uranium price because they have fixed prices in some other contracts. They've always said openly that we're looking for the 60-40 mix. So, okay, if you take that at face value, then it's going to be, you only have 60 cents on the dollar every time the uranium price goes back to Cameco. And then there's going to be some ceilings in there. And now you're saying that on top of this, you add this large chunk to your balance sheet that has no exposure to uranium price. Sure, the field of nuclear energy, yes, reactors, service contracts, all that other stuff. But it reduces your exposure to uranium. So we saw some people selling Cameco, bought into SPUT. That happened right after the announcement. Longer term, I think it was a very good move for Cameco because now they're not as much a bet on uranium, I agree, but they are a bet on the nuclear field. And I think that has very big potential to grow. Maybe not, it won't happen tomorrow. It won't happen in the next 2 or 3 months. But if your horizon is multiple years, I think it's going to do very well for itself. But it's a different type of investment. It's not a pure play on the uranium itself.
Yeah. I was actually hoping that you would say that you don't know, because then I see this retracement as an opportunity. While if you had a good explanation, I think it's not looking so great looking forward, because 1, 2, 3, 4, I would be more concerned. So I was actually very curious.
Okay, yeah, no, I did not realize you were going to ask that, but I scratched my head. I really don't understand it, and I write it off too. It's just general markets in general, but clearly you showed me that it's even superseding the general downturn. And in that case, I would say, yeah, sure, it's a buying opportunity.
I think so too. I think it can be like higher risk assets tend to go down more when there is a general downturn. I have 2 questions left. First, maybe you want to talk a little more about WMC Energy, which is the company you work for. Take the chance to pitch.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I need to pitch it because you can't invest in it.
Yeah, not the US investors, but there could be other industry opportunities.
Yeah, sure. It's an energy commodity merchant. Started pretty small. 3 Dutch guys started it, came originally from the mining sector and the financing sector. Me and a former colleague at Cameco, but now we're still colleagues at WMC. We joined them in 2019. We had some success built on the success they already started in the nuclear fuel business, and really had some fortunate contracts in place and did a couple of good transactions. And then in 2021, Sprott came along, and we started a very close relationship with Sprott, where we're looking at working with them not just in uranium, but in potentially other materials as well. And we feel that we have enough stability now to start to grow the company. And we're actually looking at building assets as well. But this is going to be more in battery materials, but looking at refineries essentially of different metals. So quite exciting. we're stepping away from just the merchant role into actually developing real assets. But we think the European market is in desperate need for it. So it's we don't have that much assets when it comes to battery metals, the mines themselves, when it comes to battery metals, but it needs to be processed in Europe.
I can say that a lot of you in the audience, you have asked about we should cover more the battery metals also, because I'm sure everyone can kind of see the trend that's happening here. We're going to need a lot more batteries.
Yeah, I mean, the case for uranium and nuclear energy is good, but the case for battery metals, it blows it out of the water. It's just like we're going to need absolutely everything and then some.
And which metals is it that you're looking at?
I would say lithium, nickel, and cobalt are certainly some of the major ones. But yeah, interesting. And anything has anything to do with energy transition. And with that, so like you need to create the energy somewhere. I mean, it doesn't matter if everybody's driving an electric car, which is going to take a massive amount of metals and material to build those. But it really doesn't matter if you have really dirty electricity produced from coal or gas or oil. Well, what's the point? You might as well have a more efficient engine in your car.
Exactly.
And have it somewhere
in fact, it maybe gets worse then, because you have to first get a lot of energy to produce the battery, and then if you're anyway burning oil to produce the electricity, you haven't really won anything.
Exactly. So you need to create you need to electrify the transport sector and the heating sector, which is we're in a good spot in Sweden because most of the heat is electric anyway, but very few countries are there already. So that's something that's going to need to take place. And then so you focus on that, but then at the same time, you need to be able to sort of decarbonize your producing assets as well. So now you have those two, and then what ties them together? Well, then that's transmission and distribution. So that's where copper and other materials come in as well. So we're basically positioning ourselves to enable this transition happen and facilitate it in any way we can.
Yeah.
So exciting times.
And as you guys know, that many times when there is a technology trend, it feels like we missed it. But many times it's not the case. It's like when we talked here when we had the coffee. You can all remember like year 2000, the people who wanted to move to Silicon Valley, and then they feel, oh no, we missed the internet because, it's over now. If you look outside, most of the cars are not electrified, and most of the world is not running on battery today.
Unfortunately not, no. It's everybody can't be Norway and have 95% hydro, but we can certainly try to be a Sweden or a Switzerland or another sort of Ontario is another great example in Canada. Very, very clean.
The second question is, especially with your father was already in the nuclear industry, how do you see the past 20 years of nuclear journey here in Sweden? And the reason that could be relevant outside Sweden is that sometimes Sweden is a front runner, and what we do here, more countries follow slightly after. Sweden had possibly the best electric grid in the world. We had hydropower in the north, nuclear power in the south, and a bridge, and some analysis have shown that it was one of the leading factors for a lot of Sweden's industry success because we had a very reliable electric grid. Then we kind of start switching off some of the nuclear power. You who kind of watch this from the outside, what have you seen? What do you think will happen from here?
Yeah, I was actually but I worked at Sydkraft, or what then turned into E.ON at the time. So I was based in Malmö right around when they shut down the Barsebäck units, and it was painful. And I had to say, mostly it was driven by the influence of Denmark. They are not only, clearly they wanted to shut it down in Sweden as well, but it was a strong political voice from Denmark. We would like to see those two shut down. And you saw it on the electricity system. The day you shut them down, there were coal power stations from the 50s started up in Denmark that was making money hand over fist. And it was, as someone who is slightly concerned, or less than, I would say that's putting it mildly, concerned about the risks of climate change, it was frustrating, enraging. And I was like, something needs to be done. I need to start getting more involved in a field where it feels like I can make at least some kind of difference. And that was basically the trigger why I went into nuclear full time. But it's been a pretty painful journey from the outside, watching what's happening in Sweden. And it's just one decision after the other, slapping a tax called a capacity tax, that just because you have nuclear capacity, you're going to have to pay a tax. It doesn't matter if you produce or not. We're just going to slap the tax on you anyway. They made it as difficult as they could to operate those plants, and then eventually electricity prices are very low because of depressed gas prices around the world. Some of them simply made it unprofitable. Especially Fukushima happened, and then this is not good. Well, I get it. Like building a nuclear power station on an active fault has risks associated with it. Now, the power station itself, it worked pretty well. It was the backup generators that got flooded, taken out by a tsunami that, I don't know, in what design do you design it for an enormous tsunami? But the accident happened anyway. It was clearly devastating. No one died. 20,000 people died by the tsunami. No one died from the accident itself, even though that's what people tend to think of when you say Fukushima, they think of a nuclear. Anyway, the result here in Europe was that, we need to have a sort of an independent cooling system that is not, if your primary cooling system, which here is the ocean, it's pretty big and pretty cold, so that helps to remove the heat very efficiently. But if something were to go wrong, say a tsunami in Sweden or in southern Germany, for example, then we need to have an independent cooling system. So then all the regulators say like, yeah, you need to build this. And to build that, obviously, it together with the depressed coal gas prices, which in turn put the electricity prices down, and the capacity act and everything else you had slapped on there, simply made it uneconomical. So that's why a few of the Swedish reactors were shut down, which today I am quite certain that Vattenfall and anyone else who's operating power stations in Sweden would kill to have those on. Because our electricity system, the Swedish electricity system is in desperate need for reliable baseload power. And that is the definition of nuclear. So it's been pretty painful, but at the same time, there are very good signals now that I was just meeting with Vattenfall earlier today, and then it's like, we're definitely looking at rebuilding our nuclear program again and hiring engineers left and right, not just nuclear engineers, but people who can actually build up the infrastructure again. So that part of it is very exciting. I feel hopeful again. Yeah, and we introduced some new rules that you can start building a nuclear reactor in new locations again, a new law. Yeah, it's funny to talk about the rules and the laws because at the time, in the early 2000s, there was a law in Sweden that loosely translated is the tankeförbudslagen. So that would be, if you translate that, it's basically you weren't even allowed to think about building new nuclear power. And in a country that sort of prides themselves as, we have freedom of speech and we have freedom of opinion, everything else. Well, apart from if you want to think about nuclear energy, that's illegal. Don't think about it now, guys. Police is on your tail. It's removed. It's removed. Okay, so you're fine now. You're fine now. Yeah. But it blew my mind. That is just the one sort of acceptance in freedom of speech, freedom of thought was nuclear energy. It just goes to show how extreme it was. And the length of that journey to be where we are today, and I think it's only the beginning. Now, just the political climate, there are virtually no opposition. Maybe the Greens, but it defines them, so I can see why they have issues to switch on that, even though the Finnish Greens they are obviously the Finns, they're so pragmatic, it's almost painful, but it's they basically look at, what are our options? We need to decarbonize our society, and we still need electricity for it to function, so we need to pick something. We're going to go with nuclear because fossil is just not an option. So as an engineer, I just see the engineering problem, kind of say that we continue with the fossil fuels. The challenge to get those CO2 molecules out of the air and put them down in the ground, that's an enormous problem. We don't have any machines that can do it efficiently. It's basically trees, but we're cutting down those also. So that's an enormous problem left that we can't solve, while it seems we can solve the problem of the nuclear waste with recycling it and intelligent storage. Oh, absolutely. Technically, I think the solution is already there. The stuff, if you actually visit, you can, and I would encourage anyone to, if you don't live too far away, even if you are on just as tourist in Sweden, or in Finland, to visit those sites, you learn so much from it. You can? I didn't know. No, you can. It's 500 meters underground. They have a live, the one in Sweden is a laboratory, and they have a very good tour where they show you which site. Club. It's at Oskarshamn, so just at the nuclear power station site in just north of Oskarshamn. And we should go there, guys. I'll take you. It shows the very responsible approach that Sweden had even from the day one when they embarked on the nuclear program. They had, this is what we're going to do with the waste. So there is a solution even before we build the first plant. We're setting money aside. We're doing some research on it. Developed a model that they've looked at how much does water transport over a few million years at its depth, even if one of these canisters would break, and it's geologically it's impossible. It will stay down. There is no doubt about it. Now, like you said, it may well be because 94% of the energy is still in that fuel bond once it's gone through the reactor. So it might make economical sense to actually recycle it. It sure could. But that's a different story. But it's the waste itself, it's actually, I see it as a benefit because it's very clearly packaged and it's easy to contain and to handle. And it's also this stigma around that you need to store it for 100,000 years. It's also grossly exaggerated because it's only really dangerous for a couple 100 years to be right next to it.
Right.
After that, you can have it put it right down here and it's like it would heat up the room nicely.
Yeah.
But you just shouldn't eat it.
Yeah.
No, so just don't eat it. That's
yeah,
okay.
exactly.
Yeah. But there's a lot of things you shouldn't eat. So you should never eat lead or other things. So there are other sort of, it's heavy metals. So yeah, that should be managed properly. But the stigma around the radioactivity that we have the fear of, that sort of part, this disappears pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And we do have technical solutions that work very well.
No, I understand. I mean, as an engineer and scientist, we understand that because here in Sweden we have something called radon gas, which is in most of the houses on the ground floor. There's probably some here in this studio, but it has to be under a certain level. We both lived in many countries. I've lived a lot in Asia. The problems with the fossil fuels are very apparent in many megacities of Asia. The pollution is enormous from the fossil fuel-driven vehicles.
I think the UN is putting numbers on how many deaths are caused by particles in the air and the sort of CO2 emissions, and it's quite staggering.
Yeah.
And a fun fact too is that actually a coal power station emits more radioactivity than a nuclear power from the carbon-14 molecules in the CO2 released.
The catastrophic events become much bigger in our mind, while the small daily risks we don't see so much, even though they are bigger.
A lot of other things going on in the world, and not even to mention if you fly overseas, transatlantic flight, chest x-rays, dental x-rays, all that, like radiation is everywhere. So we just need to have, I think, one of the curses is so easy to detect. That you have a little Geiger counter and then it's you hear a little click, something's happening, something's dangerous, something comes shooting up at me. Like the background radiation is so big compared to anything else that we're worried about. Anyway, there's great information about this on the national regulators in pretty much every country do a very good job of putting good information about it out there, because I think we need to kind of remove the stigma around it because it's just disproportional.
With that, thank you very much. Thank you for coming by.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you for listening. Hope you learned something. I got some key conclusions out of this. I hope you did too. You have to make your own decision, but I think the writing's on the wall.
I agree.
Thank you, tack. You have to say thank you, tack.
Tack så mycket. Until next time.
Hej då.